Hey, I got a question for you. When was the last time that you had a game night? Like an honest-to-God game night. You got all your friends together, your loved ones, maybe your family or your significant other. You put everything aside and just enjoyed each other's company over a tabletop game. If the answer to this question is far too long ago or never, then that's something you should absolutely remedy. In today's society, we're totally consumed by our screens and our devices. We work on them, we play on them, we communicate on them, and they have aided us in so many great ways. But unfortunately, those same devices that serve our online world sort of chip away at our offline worlds. We're social creatures. We as humans, we seek that face-to-face interaction, that human engagement, the warm bodies. And tabletop gaming is an absolutely incredible way to sort of fulfill those needs and to have a really great time. Luckily, there's Gamebox Monthly. You see, Gamebox Monthly scours the world and curates super unique indie tabletop games and sends them right to your door every month. The sort of stuff that you may never discover otherwise. And there are tabletop games for literally everybody, whether you are a couple, whether you're a raucous game night group of adults who enjoy bluffing and lying to each other all in the name of fun, or if you're families who are doing like weekly game nights in order to kind of reconnect and maybe grow together. It really is an all-inclusive activity for literally everybody. So let's get together and let's put down our phones and let's figure out what millions of people already know. We are in the middle of a tabletop gaming renaissance, and discovering games is an incredible way to rediscover each other and re-engage your original social network. Go to www.gameboxmonthly.com and rediscover social. Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of Elaborate. We're here, we're doing it, we're learning, we're growing, we're doing it together, and that's what matters. It's a first. It's like an Elaborate after dark. It's the very first time that I've ever recorded an episode. It's nighttime. It's lovely outside. More importantly, I'm sitting here with a dear old friend of mine who I haven't seen in a while. He is a filmmaker and a writer, an incredibly talented VFX artist, and his name is Chad Philip Peter, the man with 3 first names. How's it going, Chad?
Wonderful.
I could tell you've listened to the show before because you waited. You did. It's clean.
Well, no,
so
I
like
just kind of want. I don't want to be that asshole who speaks up first and says, ruins your.
There's a flow. Yeah, there's a flow to it. I appreciate you respecting the flow.
So this is the first time you've ever recorded at night?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is weird because you would assume that most people have shit to do during the day, so they can only come by and record at night. But we live in LA where everybody is a schmuck and has nothing to do during the day. Unlike you, who has an actual.
I used to be there. Trust me. And I think that's actually kind of what I wanted to talk to you about a bit more, because we haven't really had this talk. You've made your movie.
Yes, I have made my movie.
I just wanted to.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, you have also made multiple movies.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so happy to have you having done it, because
you now have somebody
else. I felt like I was on an
trenches.
Island
of
sadness.
Right.
And now I've got somebody else over there.
That's true.
Too.
You have somebody who knows the true sorrow and misery of it. Well, before we get there, let's rewind a little bit, just for some context, some background. You are one of the people in LA that I feel like I've known forever.
Yeah.
Because of the friends group. And there's sort of this circle that there was at least, 8 years ago or whatever it was. And I always feel like, oh yeah, that's the group. Those are all the people. Yeah. Yet simultaneously, I don't really know any one of them all that well. And I feel like you kind of fall into that, where like, it's like I've known you forever, but I don't know you insanely well.
It's kind of sad, right?
Like, it is. It's a little sad, which is one of the reasons why I love doing the show, is because I've got to sit down with people I've known for so long and actually kind of figure out.
I was looking forward to this because I was like, man, I haven't seen Jake in so long, and like I see you occasionally at parties.
Like it's like a Matt Hinksman party.
It's always Matt Hinksman.
I think that was the last time I saw you. Was at his birthday like 2 years ago.
Was it at his house?
Yeah, when he showed Breakwater, his short film.
Right. Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
And well, he did some other one too, but. Yeah, it's funny. That whole group, it feels like a whole other lifetime back when I was living at the Cahuenga Labs, as we called it.
Right. We were just there today. We went to the Iliad, me and my girlfriend Alexandra.
Really?
Went to the bookstore right up the road from there.
I love that place.
Yeah, it does feel like a different lifetime. It really does.
Mhm.
And it wasn't that long ago. I feel like life in LA becomes so chaptered because, and I know I don't want to turn this into like LA
That's a
industry
perfect
talk.
word for it. Perfect
Chaptered,
word.
yeah. And again, I don't want to turn this into like LA industry talk, but it's just the way that
It's going there, baby.
is people are so flaky here, and it is very true. And that's not to say that every person you meet is that way, but the truth of the matter is that you're sort of ever evolving as either an artist or a creative type, and the people that you're around is sort of ever evolving. So you have these sort of like, you have these constants, like, you and Matt have been friends for an incredibly long time. The same with I and Matt. And like, there's these people that, and my friend Tony and Paul, who've been around for a while. But for the most part, there's like, oh, remember that like that one year where I was constantly hanging out with that guy or that girl?
Yeah.
And we were constantly making projects or doing something. And then all of a sudden that's not there anymore for whatever reason. And then it's the next thing.
Right.
Whereas I feel like people that have, quote, normal jobs don't have that.
And I didn't have that for so long.
Right. Yeah.
I had it basically until I couldn't anymore.
Right.
And it's like, you push it to the limit. And like right before I got that job, the first one I had gotten, like I was still working on my movie.
Right. So again, let's
I'll let you ease us into this, but I just want to talk about
sure, but only because again, I don't know you that well. I don't even know. Are you? Because I know that you and Matt were friends from not college, but friends from
the internet
from the wait, don't tell me. I'm gonna try to mess this up. The NP3K, NP2K,
yeah.
Explain that to me.
We had oh god, that goes back a ways. So I'm kind of outing myself on this one. So back in film school, I made a film called Sex, Drugs, and Natalie Portman.
Sex, Drugs, and Natalie Portman.
Sex, Drugs, and Natalie Portman, and it was the second film I made that semester. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try marketing something for a change, and that's why I named it Sex, Drugs, and Natalie Portman. I was like, what are 3 things
that everybody wants to see? Yeah,
and
Sex,
so
Drugs, and Natalie Portman.
I did that. I put it on the internet. This is released in 2000, so you can
this
imagine.
Is long. Wow,
this is way pre YouTube.
And you were in college at this point?
I was, yeah.
Gotcha.
I was a sophomore.
Gotcha.
And it was basically my first real semester of film school, and I put that up online, and it was, I don't have any actual numbers for it, but it was significant.
Is that even, that's pre-YouTube, no?
Or I still have people saying that they've seen it. I don't know how they've seen it.
Right.
Like I mentioned it, and they're like, oh, I've seen that.
How?
That's a good question. Well, nowadays, there's no way.
Right.
But back then, when I released it, it was on Real Player. It was like 125 pixels.
And it was probably embedded on a website, I'm assuming, someplace.
Oh, yeah. Well, I went to all the Natalie Portman fan sites, as you do. And
all of them. I like how you say all of them.
I know.
Like there's this litany of Natalie Portman fan
I mean,
sites.
Back in those days of the internet, there were things like that.
Also, you're talking 2000, so Phantom Menace had just come out a year or something prior or something like that.
The year before, yeah. And so there was one site called np2k.com, and the guy who ran it was this guy named Aaron, and he was like super stoked about it, put it on the site, and like just blasted it.
Is this Aaron Moorhead?
No.
Different Aaron.
Aaron J. Rich of Idaho, and he promoted the hell out of it, and was actually a pretty funny guy. He ran a forum, and the forums were just kind of like chill, whatever.
Right.
And I also posted at the same time on theforce.net.
Which was like
which was
official,
eventually where Matt Lank, Hinkspin, and like so many other people like Teague.
Yeah.
Everybody, Mike Scott, Ryan Weber, everybody came from that forum.
Yeah, listeners might know them as Ryan versus Dorkman.
Yeah. And so when I posted that film on that site, it wasn't really a Star Wars fan film.
But it was still a genre
it kind of
thing.
fit in there a little bit. But
anyway,
anyway,
it had Natalie Portman in it, yeah.
Eventually.
Well, not in it, but you know what I mean.
But that website, NP2K, was, if you Googled Natalie Portman, it was kind of flip-flopping between number 1 and number 2.
Oh, really? As the search result?
As what would come back. And so when the guy, basically a year later, he was going to shut down the website.
Okay.
And he's like, well, do you want it? Because at that point, we had kind of become friends. And I took it from him because I was like, well, I don't really want to, I have no interest in running a Natalie Portman fan site. Because I don't want that label, but I'll take it. And I actually gradually turned it into a filmmaking website.
Oh, so
And
that's why the name is what it is.
We started running like filmmaking, like film festivals,
Right.
like trying to get people involved from different parts of the country to, write, and then someone would direct, and then they ship the footage off to someone else, and they would edit it. And that's how really I got connected with Matt.
Not for nothing, but like you're literally describing what fucking what's his face is doing right now with press play or whatever, or press record.
That motherfucker.
Who am I talking? You know who I'm talking about? What's his name? The other guy with three names.
Well, Joseph
Gordon-Levitt. Thank you. Yeah.
But yeah, and he started that almost like 10 years ago now, didn't he? Or
really?
Like
well, it sounds like you predated him by about.
Yeah, it was like the same concept. I think I joined I joined that like early on.
Oh, gotcha.
And I was already kind of past that point.
Sure,
where I was like kind of tired of it.
Right.
But
so that's sort of how.
That's the long
that
story.
was your
of how
that was your intro into the group. The group.
Yeah.
So you're not a college friend of Matt's, which is kind of what I always sort of thought maybe. So where did you go to college?
I'm from Colorado for the most part. I was born in California, but we moved to Colorado pretty young. My dad was in the military.
Oh, really? What branch?
Marines.
Oh.
He was a fighter pilot, and
really?
I lived in Japan for 2 years.
Wait, what?
And
wait, hang on.
Growing up, like,
wait, I didn't know any of this. wait, when did you leave California? Like under 2?
Yeah. Well, I was 2 to 3 years old when we lived in Japan.
Gotcha.
And then we moved back and lived in Fresno until I was 5 or 6.
Do you have like cognitive memories of living in Japan?
No, but I did later on in high school. Like, they make you take your foreign language.
Right.
And I was terrible at French and Spanish. I got like D's and C minuses, I was like, I didn't care about it. But then in college, I took Japanese my first semester and A minus.
Really?
So I know I picked up something. I don't remember jack shit.
But there must have been something in the back of your head hearing it in some sort of form when you were a child. Although I'm assuming you were on a military base.
Bases for the most part.
So there's probably not a lot of even Japanese language.
They said that we lived. I know we lived in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so I'm pretty sure I'm a glowing baby.
Yeah, I was gonna say that maybe that just all of a sudden some answers are coming in now.
Oh God!
But that's crazy. I never knew that. So did your father eventually settle? Like someplace?
Yeah,
like Colorado was.
He got a job for Continental Airlines as a pilot.
Really?
And then so they had a base in Denver, and we would fly around constantly. But they settled there, and they did try to like keep us in that area,
become a quote normal sort of like upbringing. Yeah. And so, what age are you when that sort of starts?
Basically, from age 7 is when we start to settle down. And I
pretty
counted
big.
it. We had moved like 19 times by the time I was 18.
Jesus Christ.
And
that's a lot. That is a lot. So there's been a few episodes of this show, and I've talked with a couple people who I didn't realize were also sort of the traveling kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to just make a giant leap here, being that like, oh, hey, I'm a filmmaker. And I'm aware that I can put stuff on the internet.
Yeah.
Were you sort of an introvert as a kid because of all the traveling and because of all the
for sure.
You never really sort of had like
I mean, I still remember the day my parents told me they were moving us from Fresno to Colorado. And I was like, no.
I just finally made a friend.
Which is hilarious. Yeah, I made a friend in Fresno. I'd probably be a meth addict if I stayed there. But, we got out and I'd always spend time by myself, just kind of hanging out,
right,
doing my thing.
What did Mom do?
Mom, she was really always into arts and crafts and things of that nature, and I think she did do some real estate for like my really formative years, like junior high and high school. But of course, I don't think she really loved it. She was always
as a kid though, she was your primary like caretaker while Dad was.
She was the artsy side, and my dad was the structure side.
Oh,
I guess.
Gotcha.
So sort of, even though he leaves everything a mess. So,
oh, does he? Well, he's a Marine.
Yeah.
Like they're not necessarily, once you get out of boot camp at that point, I think, right? Isn't it? Just
it was like straight out of Top Gun was his
although,
life,
that's weird too, because I don't, as somebody who's sort of naive, don't tell my brother who's also a Marine, naive to sort of the military, I wouldn't think like fighter pilot, Marine. I wouldn't think those two things go together.
Right. You usually think Air Force or Navy with but he was always a pain in my ass.
Right.
And it was kind of good because I think that's where I kind of got my alpha from.
Right.
The director side. When when I had mentioned like film to my dad, I was a little hesitant to mention it at first. And then he was like, well, if you're going to do it, you have to be a director.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's like, that's what you have to do. He's like, you can't.
He like laid the law down on
He's
you.
like, you can't do anything below that.
Wow. That's a lot of pressure.
I mean, I didn't mind it because that's what I
you
wanted to
anyway.
do.
Was he into movies?
It's funny because that was one thing I actually appreciate now. As a parent, man, we saw some weird fucking movies in our house.
Like, really?
Yeah, I think the first movie I recall seeing in the theater was Running Man.
Running Man. Wait, what was
Running
that?
Man was Schwarzenegger and
wow,
that's
random.
It was random, and he'd bring home movies. I remember we watched Boxing Helena on VHS, and I'm like,
how old are you?
Whenever it came out. I was born in 1980,
right?
So it was, we watched Predator, Die Hard, like all these movies that you shouldn't be showing children.
Right? No,
I would watch Muppet Show during the day, and then at night we'd put on Predator.
Yeah, right. Yeah, during the daytime it's the fuzzy furry things, and at nighttime it's the people getting ripped apart.
They might actually eat you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so weird. And what about mom? Was mom into film, television?
Not really. No, like Out of Africa, maybe. But,
the one movie.
Yeah, maybe that's where I got the dramatic side
right.
of things. But
I'm trying to figure out sort of where your interest came from. If it was simply just that the introverted nature lends itself to sitting at a screen.
I think that eventually
inspired
comic books. It kind of came back to that because we lived in a town called Evergreen in Colorado. It's like 20 minutes up the hill from Denver.
Okay.
And there was nothing to do there, of course, until
as you would assume.
My last year of junior high, and then this comic shop opened up in the middle of the town, and it was like haven,
Wow.
If that place didn't exist, I don't know what any of us would have done.
It was like the only thing to do.
It was the only thing to do, and I ended up getting a job there, and that's where I learned to play D&D,
right,
and Magic the Gathering.
Sure.
But it's also where my boss there, he saw that I liked to draw, and that was primarily what I wanted to do when I was growing up. I was like, I'm gonna draw, and so he's like, oh, okay, well, if you draw a comic book, I'll produce it and I'll print it up, and
wow, that's awesome.
Do like a full run, and we'll get you a table down at the comic convention in Denver. And I was like, okay, so I did it. I did it, and quickly learned that I wasn't able to produce a second comic book,
right?
But that's kind of where I got like.
That's crazy. Not that long ago, I think it was. I'm gonna try to remember now. I think it was myself, the aforementioned Matt Hinksman, and Paul Bianchi. We're all sitting around talking, and we realized in that instant, in our conversation, that we all started wanting to be comic book artists.
Wow,
that was what we all wanted to do. And I feel like as a kid, it's the most immediate creativity that you can replicate.
Yeah.
Like you can watch a movie, but as a kid, you can't just make a movie. Like there's like a video camera involved. There's some
costs
basic
some money, man.
It costs, right? Even as a child, but you can take a crayon and a piece of paper and draw a thing, whether you can make it look like it looks like you want it to look like. But I feel like that's why I know so many people who were like, oh yeah, I started I want to be a comic book artist.
Did you find that translated also into like building things between like either Legos or?
No, I hated Legos.
Like really?
I was, you know what it was? I was a lazy kid. I didn't want when I saw Lego, I saw a toy that I had to put together, and I wasn't about that.
It was work to you?
Yeah, it was work to me. I was never big on Legos.
I've never heard that before.
I was never big on Legos. I was never big on like Connects or whatever those things were. Like I liked my figures to come in a package pre-made and my toys.
Well, what about the drawing and the comic books? Did you really what drew you to them? Because for me, I always felt like ultimately it came down to the story.
Yeah, and I feel like as a child, that question I think evolves. I feel like at first it's not the story at first for me anyway. I think most people it's the imagery. It's just cool. It's like look at these colors, look at these. I'm gesturing now to my corner of my apartment where we have this little comic book area, and it's just like these bright, colorful characters and these giant shapes, and also like you want to be cool. They're cool. That sort of like. I feel like as a little kid, I probably didn't even read the comics. I probably just looked through them.
It's Yeah.
Like, and then of course, like once I got a little bit older, when I say a little bit older, probably like once I'm like at 8, 9, 10, that's when I'm highly influenced by my neighbors. There's this family that lived across the street from me. There was 3 brothers and 1 girl. The girl was my age. All the brothers were older in different increments. And the immediate older brother, the one that's a couple years older, and the middle brother were both giant comic book nerds. And they were always around. And they were sort of like my de factoid brothers. My own brother was a huge influence in me, but he and I couldn't be more different. Like he is, as the aforementioned, Marine, just not... He couldn't give a shit about comic book. Like
I can't even imagine that person growing up with you in the same household.
Oh my God, we are so we couldn't be more different. But in any case, they sort of nurtured my love of comics as like as an art form at that point. Like, and that's when I got into the stories. And of course, this is the golden age of like the image boom. And like Image Comics it's weird too because
all of it, Spawn, Gen 13,
that was it. Yeah,
J. Scott Campbell was my homie.
Yeah, and so I feel like that's when I started getting into stories, which is weird because, it wasn't until after that I went back and revisited like Spider-Man stories and early Fantastic Four and early and that's when I started to appreciate the stories. But at this point, I'm already a preteen or a teenager,
Well, it's funny that I said the story is what drew me to it because it's actually not. It's actually exactly what you're saying.
Right.
The art, I would always go for the cool cover as opposed to the cool story.
Me too.
And but as far as being an artist and doing it yourself, like maybe that was what I felt was the through line to film. Yeah. Ultimately,
you know what? And for me, I never wanted to make movies. To this day, I'm not sure I want to. No, I'm kidding. I've already made.
You got a long way for someone.
For me, I never thought filmmaking was really the thing. I definitely did enjoy comics. I always wanted to make comics. I always wanted to write. I tried to write my own and draw, but the problem was that I was, the best kid artist in my town of people that weren't really great artists. Right. So you would think that you're good. And then you get to college and you see other kids your age and you go, oh shit, I'm terrible. You're like, I can't draw for anything, Or like you go to a comic book convention, you see the line of people with their portfolios and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, this is what people do? Oh, I'm not going to be a comic book artist.
And they're so much faster than you, too.
Oh, my God.
Oh, man, you did this and you did it in like an hour. Yeah. And like, you're not sick of it and your arm's not aching.
Right.
Like, that's ultimately why I stopped. Like
you just weren't good enough.
It went a step further and I actually, right before the end of high school, I was like, well, I like making movies because I had been doing it.
Okay,
I had gotten a camera.
So you did start like in like the teen years.
Started young. I did a 45-minute linear shot linear. Because you couldn't like edit. There was no non-linear editing.
I could, Chad. I had 2 VCRs. I could edit. Okay.
Oh, you lucky bastard.
Oh yeah, those daisy chain cables.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
I feel so sorry for you right now. We messed that take up. Oh, we got to rewind the tape and start again and
find the spot.
Hope that we got the right spot.
You do that thing that when you watch it back, you could see the start of a different take really quickly.
Gone.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, we made a 45-minute film.
That's incredible.
With none of that, like no overlap where you see it. It was called Fuzzies, and I was the first person, little creature that would run around killing the neighborhood kids.
Fantastic. Yeah. And you say we? Who is we?
My friend, my best friend Justin Denicky, and then the neighbor kids, Davis and Nick.
Any siblings?
No,
only child. Yeah, that's a
couple cousins there. I kind of consider them my sisters, but
right on. And so at some point, you're just like, all right, well, maybe this filmmaking thing is a better route for me than the drawing because that's not going to happen. Remind me again, what age were you when this guy was like, oh, I'll make a comic?
I was probably 16, 17.
I need to see this comic, Chad.
Like oh, it's terrible.
I know.
But I'll give it to you.
I know it is, Chad.
And it's vile. I mean, it's basically Apocalypse California, the comic book.
Really?
No, not at that level. But it's I don't even know where
how you
are anymore.
All I know is that I recently came across a thing of my drawings and my quote comic strips, and they're not even abysmal. That the abysmal is too good of a compliment to use. They're unbearably bad. The fact that anybody looked at this and went like, "Yeah, you're good. You have a future." every one of them should be shot, put up on a like that is terrible.
I miss that though, like the ability to think like, oh man, these are great.
These are great, yeah.
And because then you just create, and you don't worry about
Right.
the backlash and shit.
And if only we could do that with our movies now.
Yeah,
because I don't look at any of it and go, "This is great."
No, I can't wait to get into that with you.
But honestly, to talk about, you were talking about like if that sort of led to filmmaking. For me, I don't think that it did, because again, I never intended to be a filmmaker.
Right.
I wanted to be an actor. Still want to be an actor. But I think that reading so many comics and at least trying that up until my early 20s led itself to me understanding composition and me understanding. So even though I didn't realize it, that was like where I think I got the tools to be able to tell a visual story, because what is a comic book if not a really incredible storyboard?
Yeah.
And to this day, I storyboard, decently enough to the point where, for the most part, that's exactly
turns out what it. Yeah,
exactly.
It sounds like that was your film school, like basically.
Sort of, yeah, absolutely.
You're kind of building the visual sense of storytelling in your head.
Exactly.
And that's exactly how it translated.
And by no means am I I'm not a visual filmmaker. I mean, like you're
not Ridley Scott.
No, like there's not. But in any case, so you're tinkering, you're playing, you got a 45-minute movie that you somehow made with a VHS tape.
Yeah, and it's funny, like there's so many things about that time that I look back now and I'm like, of course, you kind of wonder later on how you kind of end up in certain places.
Sure.
And the movie that we really settled on as kids, like for whatever reason, was Alien 3.
Really?
Which is a movie directed by David Fincher, who I now work for.
Which is fucking crazy.
Bizarre, because it was kind of transformative, and I think I learned so much about cinematography from that, because we didn't see Alien 1, we didn't see Aliens. Honestly, that was the first movie we saw.
It's weird too, because I feel like Aliens is the one that everybody
goes to,
because it was on like freaking TV every day.
Right.
Like that was the one that I never saw. I saw Aliens before I saw Alien, because it was just on TV.
We were still at that age where we were still scared shitless by the concept of sitting down to watch these movies. Yeah, I don't know why the hell we saw it. I seem to remember my dad giving me the option to go see Alien 3 in the theater or getting a Super Nintendo. And I was like, well, that's a no-brainer.
It was Super Nintendo, right?
Absolutely,
yeah, okay.
Yes. But I, for whatever reason, I just remember that conversation happening. And I think still to this day, like, well, that's kind of fucked up. That's a weird conversation. Like,
and somehow you ended up with Alien 3. Like, did you just, when you say that's the movie you quote landed on, like you and your friends just watch it over and over again?
For some reason, I don't know what it is, because there's so many things of that era, and I don't want to say like we were obsessed with it. It's just for whatever reason we'd go play Alien.
Right.
We'd go run around the hillside, in our mountain town.
Right.
And
is it like South Park when you grew up?
Trey Parker went to my high school.
Oh shit, really?
Yeah. And he graduated exactly 10 years before, and some of his best friends from school were actually our teachers in the school. And so
shit.
Going through the whole, like, he went through the whole theater program that I went through there.
Right.
And I think to this day, really, he's the only one who ever
did anything with it
in the film industry. Anyway, I know that
except for you, Chad.
Hey,
he's the only one of two.
Yeah, extraordinaire. Yeah. But yeah, I think for whatever reason that just kind of like, we would always daydream, there wasn't much to do in our little mountain town.
Right.
And so I
was just waiting for you to say that. That's all I wanted you to get to.
Evergreen's actually in an episode of South Park.
Oh shit, really?
It's like where I think the hippies take over South Park and they send them all on a bus to Evergreen.
Really?
It's like they're zombies or whatever. I forget what it is. And they all go to Evergreen and they take over the city. But somehow that all kind of, we stopped making movies at some point. We started when we were like 13, and we kind of trade off the camera.
Right.
But for the most part, I was the one
doing the
kind of like forcing the neighbor kids to spend hours on end.
Yeah, that was sort of me, but it wasn't that young. Like, I didn't start tinkering with that shit until I was 16, maybe. That was when, like, I would take, me and my friends went up to, my best friend Jesse, his family had like, his grandfather maybe owned this little house on the lake in upstate New York. And so each family member had like a week there during the summer, like every different, and so like his family had it for 1 week. And so he was able to bring friends So like, and that was the summer where I was like, oh, let's play with this camcorder, and we made these dumb little movies, and they were all like comedy. We never tried to be serious. They were always like really bad, dumb comedy things that were nonsensical.
Were you at that point where you had started judging your own work yet, or were you
no?
So you weren't worried about making a complete pile of shit. You just go out and do it.
Exactly. And I wasn't even smart enough to really understand anything that was happening other than like, oh, we're just goofing around with a camera, and like whatever dumb things we had. If we had like, I remember because it was the popular thing to do was to shoot pellet guns up there. We all had all had pellet guns. I was like, oh, we got guns. They look like real guns on shoot. So it was, everything was like comedy being shot. And it was it was always the joke of like the hero walks out and he stands there, and then you cut to like the four of us all like shooting rapidly, right. and the guy's just like moving his arms slowly and he's not getting hit. Like it was that sort of comedy. But that was when I started, and that wasn't like me getting into filmmaking. That was just like, oh, that was that was my screwing around with a camera. Where I feel like
you planted the seed though, and I think that's exactly what.
And it's true though, because I was the one who was like, oh no, I know how to edit this. I can figure out how to do this with the VCRs. I can figure out how to like. I was the one who was figuring out the technical element of it all, and I was the one who figured out, oh, if I take the RCA cables and I split the two audio cables left and right, and then the video cable, and I come out of my CD player. I can have
sound.
Music. Yeah, I can put music on this by pushing play on a Discman. Like, that I was that guy figuring that shit out.
Oh man, dude, my 45-minute feature is scored by John Williams. He doesn't know it, but
And it's also,
so we had a titling machine too that was like, it would store 6 titles.
Okay.
And you had to you'd lose a generation on your VHS.
Okay.
Running it back through, and you'd have to hit like enter, save one, enter, and it would like load it up on the screen. Wow. It was like the shitty like block text.
Right.
The
kind of shit that you see nowadays on like the Goldbergs. Do you watch the show The Goldbergs?
Yeah, I've seen an episode.
Gotcha. So it's that sort of like, I feel like that is the very romanticized version of kids in the 80s and 90s playing with filmmaking
whatever
tools.
The fuck they had.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it is really interesting that those seeds were kind of planted at that young for you, though. I feel like that is the sort of thing that is the, like, you hear those stories about those are really great filmmakers who were like, oh, since he's been a little kid, he's had the video camera in his,
Well, it's funny because, we gave it up.
Around what time?
My friends and I, like, we kind of stopped making movies around like 15. So it was like from 13
when
to
girls
15.
became a thing, maybe.
Girls didn't, oh man, that came much later. I know it was
not for you and your D&D.
It was
friends.
comic books and Magic the Gathering.
Really?
And, like, sitting around, like, God, man, we would play like the Star Trek card game. We would literally just spread the planets out around like the floor of the room, and we'd play like all night until 8 in the morning.
So do you think it was teen laziness?
I think it was, we were living our lives in like a fantasy world, basically.
Oh, gotcha.
I think that's kind of where it was.
Are these other friends of yours, were they
film guys?
Yeah,
no.
film guys? No. Again, you were the one leading charge.
They were the DMs of the group. Like,
right.
Sometimes I would do it too. We'd kind of run our games.
Right.
But, no, for the most part, like, I transitioned mostly into comic books, and then I got really kind of serious and like almost kind of anal retentive about either if it was art, or whatever. I was always kind of the person in the group that was kind of mad at someone else for not getting off their ass and doing something.
Interesting.
And I don't know what that came from. I think maybe it was because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right.
And it kind of came out subconsciously in this form of this alpha.
It's surprising you didn't become a producer is what it sounds like.
Yeah, ultimately. But I ended up transitioning into animation.
Oh, interesting.
And animation. And then until my grades were terrible. I got like a 1.8 in
high school.
In high school,
yeah.
And
were you just
college was like.
Were you a smart kid but just didn't care?
My attention span was just like.
Oh.
It wasn't like if cell phones existed back then, I was on a cell phone. It was just like I just didn't care.
Right.
About what we were doing.
But
I never did homework.
Were you a bad kid?
No.
See,
no.
It really is incredible. I love the fact that I have all these different people from all these different walks of life that are all in sort of a similar field, and they all have such similar stories. Multiple people have shared the story with me, as well as I've shared it with other people. Like, I was the same way. I was not a bad kid. Teachers loved me. in 4 years of high school, I never did a single homework assignment. Not one.
See, we're exactly on the same
They
page.
passed me because I was a good kid, and they were like, Jake, next year do your fucking homework. So they would pass me with a 65 or whatever was the minimum to pass me. And, they liked me because I was a good kid and I didn't cause problems. I was just lazy and I just ultimately didn't care. Like, and also for me, there was never a negative repercussion. Like, my mom never like came down on me for a bad grade so there wasn't that like, oh no, if I don't do this, I'm going to be grounded or I'm going to be, because my mom was too busy supporting and, working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads.
That sounds exactly like my upbringing for the most part.
Yeah. And so it was like, I wasn't a bad kid. I was just in my own world doing my own thing. I was creative, and the adults in my life supported that, yet simultaneously they weren't punishing me for being totally lazy about school and education and whatnot.
Are your parents still together?
No, negative. I don't really know my father. The fans at this point are fucking sick of hearing me talk about it.
I remember hearing something.
Dude, I have major daddy issues that my dad left when my mom was pregnant with me. And it just isn't in my life.
Well, that explains everything.
Yeah, right. I never asked this of you, but were your parents together during all of this travel?
No, they got divorced when I was 12, 13 years old. So it was like right before all this started.
So you
basically right before, because I was living with my mother when my dad had gotten me that little handy cam to shoot on, like when I was 13.
Oh, and so where was your father living? Was he nearby at least?
Same town, just on the opposite. He was a few miles away.
That seems like was he around? Was he present?
He was not really. Like he was. I mean, he was a pilot, so he was gone.
Oh shit!
Right. Most of the times he'd be gone for like a week. 4 days at a time, whatever. And we kind of see him, whenever. But even my mom was gone for the most part. I think that's why,
because she was supporting
my best friend Justin lived like 4 houses up the road. Because I was mostly staying at his house, like growing up, like.
As we have very similar. You had a Justin, I had a Joseph.
Exactly.
yeah. That's really interesting. And so,
but it seems so common. Like, the popular kids aren't gonna sit around and like write and play.
They're too busy getting into actual trouble.
Use their brains to like do things. Right.
We had to figure out shit. Like we had to literally figure out fun.
You figured shit out?
How to be fun. Well, as a child, I forgot everything I ever learned. But do you have any sort of like resentment for your dad for not being around, being a pilot, or is it just sort of like, that's the way it was?
A little bit. Nowadays, though, it's more like we're still on good terms.
Right.
I think now it's a bit of politics and a bit of everything. But I try not to be political. I'm very kind of like bipartisan.
Sure.
And
you're not that guy on Facebook going like, fuck you.
No.
Even though a part of me thinks at this point now you have to be. You should be. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah. And I agree with you to an extent. And at the same time, I try to keep it nowadays I try to keep it compact and in my movies.
Right. Oh, interesting.
I feel like it's hard to get somewhere with people when you're arguing. Of
course.
I like try to just present a better example of how to.
The nature of the word arguing leads itself to.
It's just you're gonna be doing this the whole time, like hitting your head.
Right. What about when you decide that you want to become an animator and not a filmmaker? What does dad, who was like telling you had to be a director, think of that?
Actually, I mean, filmmaking came after.
Oh, okay. So when you were messing around with your friends,
I wanted to be a comic book
Gotcha.
artist, and then
it was a hobby.
And I was like, well, comic books, like I couldn't even finish the second book, So I was like, well, maybe it's not in the cards there because it's just, artists starve to death basically.
Right. Yeah.
So I tried to look around. I looked into CalArts. I looked into the School of Visual Arts as far as like good animation schools.
Right.
And I was like, well, the schools are so expensive. Dad says he's not going to be able to afford it, but I'll apply anyway and hope, cross our fingers.
Sure.
And so I applied to CalArts. I applied to School of Visual Arts. I applied to UCLA and a couple other schools.
With a crappy high school.
All of them, with a crappy high school GPA. And every single one said no.
Right.
And except there was a summer program in Vancouver at this Vancouver Institute of the Arts and for animation.
Okay.
And it was like a 2-month 3-month intensive,
like a vocational kind of thing. Yeah.
And so that was the first thing I did after high school.
Oh.
Moved in the summer of '98 to Vancouver. Stayed on the UBC campus and took the bus into town. It was kind of my first experience out on my own.
Like being in the real world, quote.
Yeah. I had a dorm room at UBC, which is a totally different school than what I was going to.
What's UBC stand for?
It's University of British Columbia.
Gotcha.
I believe. And it's a really awesome, beautiful campus. And I would take the bus down into downtown and learned from this animator. His name was Lee Mishkin, and I think he is best known for drawing the Batman, or the original Batman opening credits.
Oh,
like the POW and all that stuff. I think he had won. I think he won an Academy Award for something else that was like Mary Poppins related or something.
Oh wow. And that was who you were learning from.
Yeah, I mean the guy could barely move or speak by the time I had class with him.
Oh jeez,
he died shortly after that. But it definitely taught me like
so cavalier about that horrible thing. Yeah, he was fucking decrepit by the time I got there, and then he croaked. But whatever.
It was really like his underlings who taught the whole class. And
it was his knowledge as taught through people who were maybe more capable teachers.
But by this point, my mother had moved. She had met somebody at a junk store in Denver who actually lived in...
I'm sorry, a junk store?
A junk store. She would take me junking down to Broadway, which has all these antique stores.
Junking?
Junking is what we call it.
Like pawning? Pawn stuff?
No. Just like antique shops. And
I've never heard that referred to as junking.
Junking. Well, that's what my mom calls it. So.
Maybe that's like a family vernacular that nobody else uses.
That was another part of my upbringing, is her taking me to these antique stores and stuff like that. And eventually she met her future husband, her second husband, my stepdad, at a store when he was on a work trip.
Interesting.
And they went on a date that night, and the rest is history. But she lived in Seattle with him at the time I was going to school. So she moved. She asked me my senior year of high school, did I want to move to Seattle or not?
Wow.
And I said, no, I'd like to finish school here. So I moved in with my dad.
It's creepy, Chad. My mom went to Buffalo, upstate New York, from Long Island. Same thing. Like met a guy, ended up moving up to Buffalo when I was in. Yep. And I stayed back home and going to college. It didn't last. I didn't end up finishing the college, but it was like literally the exact same thing where it was like my mom was like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing," and I'm like, "All right." And she was like, "Peace out. Good luck." And I was like, "Good luck to you." I don't know, it wasn't as informal.
There's only
as that,
so many pathways to this kind of thing.
It's absolutely incredible. But so you're really truly on your own then at this point. What about your two friends? Did they end up staying local or? They
stayed local, yeah. I think it was just Justin. The other two, Davis and Nick, I haven't really talked to them in a while. Their parents kind of hated us because we would draw up like comic book collectible cards and we'd sell them to all the neighbors, and they were like, "Stop taking all our kids' money."
Yeah.
To trade them for these cards, and so they just kind of like eventually stopped talking to us.
Yeah, I also don't really keep in great touch with like my high school friends, and I love them to say I love them to death.
None of them,
Jesse
really.
And Mike, and I honestly I think part of it is just like
eventually
the why we both went in so many different ways, and they're. Again, it's not like I think we're not like-minded. I think we still probably agree on most everything. We still like all the same shit, but it's a matter of like, they all became family men. And also, I mean, the short answer is probably my best friend Jesse is not on social media. So it's sort of hard.
That's
we live in the social media world now where it's like, I'm going to set myself a reminder. Hang on a second, podcast. Like, hey, let me tell Siri, hang on. Siri, remind me tomorrow at noon to call Jesse, or text him at least, you shithead. All right, perfect. Thanks, Siri.
I added it to your reminders list for tomorrow at 12 p.m.
Oh,
great,
so
awesome.
Proper.
See, I have to, if I don't, I made her British. It makes me feel like I'm a spy.
I just moved in with a Brit. That makes it so much easier.
Oh, we're going to talk about that. But anyways, like I feel like since he's not on social media, that makes it a little more difficult, but I also just sort of don't keep in touch. And also, like,
it's hard,
So it's such different life experiences,
and
too.
Like, the older we get, like, I've already had 2 of our, like, 10 or 11 have died already of our high school group.
Wow.
One passed away last year. He had skin cancer, unfortunately.
Oh, my God. I'm sorry to hear that.
Just didn't check up on it.
That's a weird number if you tell me because of your age. You're not an old, we're not, you're a couple,
and they were younger than me. They were probably
a
grade or 2 below me
probably my
in
age.
high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. we're at that age
Right.
where
Accidents are going to
you
happen and
realize
life is going to happen.
is,
Yeah.
is you're at this age and
Right.
now shit just happens.
That's
now.
crazy. All right, so let's get back to you as an animator. You're animating, you're drawing shit's
Mm-hmm.
moving. At what point are you like, all right, this is what I'm doing now, and what's your future as an animator?
At that point, I had come back to Colorado, and basically just said it's not in the cards for animation.
Really? So
'Cause I was
it was
like,
pretty quick.
It was like they were telling us the numbers of like
What you're making?
South Korea, like what the artists there, like how many images they have to draw in a week to be an in-betweener,
Right.
drawing all the in-between,
Wow.
images. And I was like, that sounds miserable. I struggled just drawing one or two, and I was never great with like form or whatever. I was always good with like heads and faces.
That was my problem, man.
Arms, hands were out of the
If you
question
asked me,
for
which is one of the reasons why my early comics were shit. If you asked me to draw the same character in two different positions, I was fucked.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. Like I was not capable.
It's tough, man.
Yeah.
Like you gotta study, you gotta draw constantly to be able to get it and
absolutely.
get in a good flow. And I just didn't have the patience for it. And I didn't want to, ironically, I didn't want to sit at a desk all day long and work on this. So eventually I came back, and my dad was like, all right.
When you
well,
went back,
I went back to Colorado
Where
because it
did
was
you-
only a summer
sure,
program.
yeah. But at this point, your mom was gone. Did you move in with your dad? Did you get your own place? What are you doing at this
Back
point?
to Colorado with my dad.
So you moved in with your dad
Yeah.
at this point. Gotcha.
And just because all my friends were there, and I knew I was going to come back, and plus my grades weren't any good whatsoever, so I wasn't going to move anywhere. I had LA was not a thing at
No.
this point in my life.
Quick sidebar. Not to derail this too much. I'm just curious. What do you consider home?
LA.
You consider LA home?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That's interesting to me,
Yeah.
especially because somebody who's traveled. Like, I had a conversation with. I'm not sure if you ever met my good friend Kenny Cooper, who was on an earlier episode, where he's just like, yeah, I think like ultimately home ends up just being where you went to high school. I think most people think that way because it's like that's your formative years.
I
but you
did
don't-
for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
But now it's like it's so far removed.
Right.
And like when I go back to Evergreen, no one actually lives there.
Right.
Like they live in Denver.
Interesting.
They're spread out across Colorado. So it's
Interesting.
kind of like, and you've got kids now. So it's like also spread out.
Right. Very interesting.
And I have so many friends here now.
Right,
That it's like,
right. So anyway, I'm sorry. You were talking about you were back with your dad.
yeah, back with dad. And I kind of started hearing what he was saying, and he was like, well, why don't you first get a degree in business? And
It's so
then-
pragmatic.
yeah,
So
right.
yeah.
First get a degree in business, and then go back and get a master's in film, so that you at least understand how to,
So at this point, did you decide?
market and do.
You decided like, oh, I think I want to get back into filmmaking.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
had that conversation with him, and I had
Right.
applied to some film schools and didn't get in.
Right.
So I think that was the final deciding factor,
Right.
where I was like, okay, I'll do business first, and maybe I'll minor in film at first or whatever.
Right.
So I went to Red Rocks Community College, and there
That's also in Colorado. I'm assuming there.
I took an acting class
Ooh.
first semester because I had done
Acting class at a community college. I've been
Ooh,
there, brother.
yeah.
That's a good time.
Well, my senior year of high school, like I didn't have any like hard classes left, so I had 6 art classes for my final semester.
Yeah,
Plus, one of them was choir
Oh, right
and
on.
acting in the school play, which was just I was one of the barbershop quartet. If you
Gotcha.
can imagine me singing.
Gotcha.
But I loved it so much. I loved the cast parties, and like it was the swing dance phase. So like at the end of every
Right.
single like
Sure.
cast party, we'd be
Yeah,
swing dancing.
Cherry Poppin'
And
Daddies was real big right now.
Squirrel Nut Zippers, baby.
Oh, hells yeah.
So that kind of, I wanted to get into acting a little bit. And there, I just remember there was this one kid who went up and just blew my mind. Like he did a performance by himself and just was like, I was like, damn. And I talked to him a little bit because he had mentioned something about some film classes. And he said, oh yeah, we've got like a whole film school at this community college. Like,
Wow.
it's at a place called Lowry downtown. It's an old Air Force base that was shut down, and they had like a couple buildings
Wow.
that they turned into a film program. And so the next semester, I signed up for a couple classes down there, and that was it. Like
Wow.
at that point, I switched my major, and
All you cared about was film.
yeah, and so I started making. That was the kind of school where they just said, "Here's a camera, go film."
Right. And at this point, this is sort of now jumping to sort of where we ended up with sex, drugs, and Natalie Portman.
That was my final film that I made at that school,
school.
before I transferred to. I got better grades. I learned
how to be a
everything.
student.
I learned digital editing.
Gotcha.
Basically within, I think I only had about a year and a half worth of classes
Gotcha.
there, and then I transferred to University of Colorado Boulder.
Oh,
which was known as a extremely like hardcore art film school.
really?
And they did not shoot on digital.
Oh, of course not.
It was like, here's some Super 8 film. I want you to go home, get a needle pen, and I want you to scratch on the film
Jeez.
and bring it back, and we'll show it to the class.
Oh my God.
That was our first thing.
Are you serious?
Yeah. They didn't accept a single film credit.
From any other school anywhere?
From the other place. Yeah. They were like,
wow.
Nope, we don't believe
You were through the ringer.
Yeah, I look back on it and I was like, that was actually kind of nice because it was, it went from all the technical things.
Right.
So I understood all the technical stuff. And then I had to go back and
Right.
suffer through teachers who just like would drag the name of every filmmaker I ever
Right.
cherished through the
Right.
mud and say they were garbage.
You
And
look back now and you say that's great. What was your headspace at that time?
at that time, I was like, these guys are idiots.
Yeah.
Like,
So were you sort of like a rebel? Like you like the
I was a little arrogant. I
Yeah.
would say I was like, I'm better than these guys. Like,
Right.
in my
Of
head,
course,
I'm like
yeah.
thinking, and I'm thinking about the teachers, not
Yeah, and
my
you're-
fellow students.
you're what 1920?
Yeah. By that point, I was 20, so 2021.
2021, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah, of course you're just like fuck that. What am I even doing here? Yeah.
I think everybody is.
Right.
Everybody who wanted to be in film school. There were some. I was always confused by the kids that were there in class, but they didn't really seem to know what they wanted.
Right?
I'm like, how did you end up here then? Like,
That never made sense with me, even in a community college class. Sometimes
Right.
I would be like, "Why are you here? What are you doing here?" But so you took the dive. You went head first in the film school. How long are you there before you end up in LA?
ooh, I mean that was like a big jump for me. Like that 2 years that I was at Boulder was 3 years, I guess. That was like a whole. That whole thing changed me in such a way, like as far as like how I was viewing movies and
Right.
everything else. It was mostly cinematography based,
Right.
and like Trey Parker went to that film school as well.
Wow.
And then when I graduated 2003, and I was the only person in my film school that I knew wanted to move to LA.
Gotcha.
Everybody else was like, well, we'll probably stick here or we'll go to New York.
Right.
Because a lot, I thought of LA and I was like, well, fuck that place. It's like, it's terrifying.
Right.
Like, the thought of driving, in LA back then was like, actually like horrifying.
Right.
And I didn't want to do it. But I had family, my dad's family, my uncles, my cousins all live in San Clemente, like the southernmost point of Orange County.
Okay. So at least it's like not
was close
terribly.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like if I understood geography of America better, then I probably would have came to LA sooner. Had I known that more, because my brother moved to Vegas when I was in high school, senior in high school, maybe freshman, sophomore. I don't know, whatever. Junior year, I think maybe. But I feel like had I known that Vegas and LA were so close, I might have been more
You might have
inclined.
been more inclined to come out.
More inclined to come out here because
So
I
you
feel
never
like that's
came
part
out
of
even
it.
for Vegas to visit?
No, it wasn't until I had already moved then to Florida, where I spent a long time in Florida, that I finally came and visited my brother in Vegas. My brother had lived in Vegas for years before I ever was able to come out and visit. Like, I didn't see him for years unless he was home visiting New York, But yeah, it is though. It's weird. It's just having some semblance of family somewhere nearby,
It was
help.
the only. I didn't have any friends
Right.
here.
Yeah.
By that point, we were like the film forums were pretty prevalent in my life because
Sure.
like I had so many friends from there that I actually had met. Do you know Chris Hannell?
Or name sounds familiar.
He and Teague, our friend Teague,
Okay, yeah.
were really close, and I think they went to the Dave School in Florida together.
Gotcha.
But Chris Hannell and I were talking about moving out here together and just being roomies. And but I beat him out here. I knew I was going to be out here a little early.
Right.
So I came out, moved straight into my grandma's house without telling her. She would stay at our family. We have a family cabin in Colorado. northern Colorado. So she was living there during the summers.
Summer, yeah.
And so,
you
during the
just
summer, I moved into
came
her
there.
house, and then I was like, "Oh, by the way, Grandma, I moved in downstairs." She was like, "Oh."
Was she very pleased with that? Because I feel like most grandparents would be like, "Oh my god, my baby boy."
I mean, she's a little particular, but no, totally. She's like, I think my girl cousins were always terrified of her because they just thought, "Oh, Grandma doesn't like us."
Oh, really?
I was like, "No, that's not true at all. She loves you guys. You guys just let her get to you.
"Oh,
Like
gotcha."
you got to give her some pushback." Now it's hilarious because now they all get along great with her. Now that
Was she sort of a stubborn?
Now that they saw me, like, just being like, "Grandma, just shut your pie hole. No,
Right,
I'm not
yeah.
gonna do that.
right,
Stop talking like that." And,
Right.
like, she would just kind of laugh it off. Like,
right. That's sort of everybody in my family. Like people, I feel like I've had friends who've been like, "Wow, your family's really abrasive," and I'm like, "No, they're not abrasive. They're only abrasive if you don't say shut your face,
Exactly.
or if you
Yeah.
don't pick on them for a thing. Like
if
you
they
got to
know they can get you.
You have to be a little bit mean in order to get by in a household, my family. But so, like, at what point is the grind?
Pretty much immediately.
Yeah. You just immediately diving into it.
I dove into it. But that's like San Clemente is like
Right.
70 miles south of LA. But I didn't really
Long time.
realize that. So I was
Right.
like, "Oh yeah, I'll just drive up, look around." But I'm way the hell down there. How in the hell am I gonna find work?
That was the
I didn't know anybody.
when I first moved out here, I
Mhm.
was supposed to be staying at a place at Laguna Beach.
Oh yeah.
And again, I didn't realize I had a friend from a previous place that I'd lived who I told I was moving to LA. He was like, "Oh, well, come and stay with me in Laguna Beach."
You're
until
like,
you get
this is Hollywood.
and I was like, "Oh, good, I'll do that, and then I'll get a job, and I'll get an apartment, and then it'll be great." But not
Yeah.
realizing that you can't do that from down there.
No.
And of course, it didn't matter anyway because I ended up not staying with him. But that's a different story.
Well,
But yeah.
And of course, all the jobs I'm looking at are like on Craigslist and Mandy.com, which I don't know.
Oh, I remember Mandy. I used to use that.
Mandy was actually the one that ended up getting me a job. I remember seeing on the job list one day, this thing came up. They were looking for an electrician or something for a Fox Search Lab movie.
Oh, not for Searchlight, Search Lab.
Search Lab, which was a division of Searchlight, which would produce and finance
Right.
20 short films a year if you pitched them well enough.
Right.
And if they liked it, they would pick one or two a year and they'd give it a budget and make it a Searchlight film.
Oh,
So this guy was making a movie and I was like, "This sounds awesome. Like it's being shot at the Fox lot." And like the jobs on Mandy.com and Craigslist
Yeah.
were pretty terrible.
right. That was like a fucking diamond in the
It
rough.
was a
something
diamond
like
in the
that.
rough. And I did actually, I take it back. I did have some friends from the Force.net forums who lived in San Diego.
Okay.
So I could go down there and they were making films. They made a Star Wars fan film
Gotcha.
that never came out that was famous called Prelude to Hope,
Okay.
which has the exact same plot as Rogue One.
Oh my
by
God,
the
are you
way.
serious?
Yeah. It was all about the Death Star plans.
That's
and, like,
hilarious.
this whole team that dies to get them. But anyway, so I sent an email through Mandy to these people and I said, "I can't do any of the stuff you're looking for, but I can shoot your making of documentary."
Oh, look at you fucking
And-
hustling.
And
That's
they
brilliant.
came back and they're like, "That's awesome. Yeah. Well, we can't pay you anything." And but here's where to come. And I was like, "Cool. I've got one crew member." So I got my buddy Devin in San Diego to come up.
That's
And we drove up at the ass crack of dawn to Burbank, somewhere actually
probably right here.
within a mile or two of where we're at right now. And went in, and this was like, to date, this was actually one of the highest professional quality shoots I've ever been on. It was massive.
Wow.
There were so many people. And it was a black and white 35 millimeter noir.
Oh, wow.
And it was crazy. And I became friends with the director, Mark Marchillo.
Well, you were doing him a huge solid by just
And-
showing up.
Yeah. And I met the team there, and the producer of it was a finance VP at Fox, Mike Hurd.
Not a bad guy to know.
Not a bad guy to know. And they were all super nice. And of course, over the course of 2 weekends, we got to know him pretty well after shooting
Right.
18 hours of behind the scenes
That's
footage and
crazy.
setting up interview footage. Like
right. Doing
at
talking
Fox,
heads.
like
and,
I had to
yeah.
go to their offices in the Fox Plaza and like set up camera, and it was perfect.
It's a really genius way to get your foot in the door, dude. Like, offer a thing that nobody's going to turn down.
For free. Yeah. I wish I had people doing that for us.
Ditto. Yeah.
I would say yes in a heartbeat.
Man.
Uh, Eventually, though, I did come back to Mark and I said, is there a way to get a job on the Fox lot? Eventually, that question, the harder question, did have to come
Right.
eventually, and he said, "Well, I can set you up with a meeting with the people who will hire the temps on the lot." And so that's how I got my first job.
That's how you got your first job,
becoming a temp,
which is pretty. It sounds like it was pretty quick comparatively to most people's.
It took 3 months.
Yeah, that's
It
pretty insane.
was pretty fast, and in hindsight, it was totally.
So
right away.
I want to talk about Apocalypse, California.
Okay.
And at what point does that even? At what point do you go? I just need to make a feature film.
Oh man, that was pretty much from the get go. But I think everybody.
So you had that wherewithal immediately, because I don't remember you making shorts very much. I mean, like obviously you talked about the ones
I made tons of shorts, and I've been.
But in LA,
yeah.
Oh,
not that many.
It might have just been because when I met you, you were already working on Apocalypse. That might have been why.
And that might have been why. I mean, I think I've done over like 20 to 30 shorts.
Jeez.
And like most of them are like 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
I know because you're in one that was never released or never finished. Pear Blossom.
Oh shit, that's right. I forgot. I came into
you came and you were a
Border Patrol guy
with
Julian Higgins, another very talented director.
And so it's like I've done all these different shorts, but Apocalypse kind of came out of nowhere. Like I just knew I wanted to make something, and like this, it started in 2007, and I was living at the time with Mark Heiliger, who I do the podcast, a movie podcast with, which we're gonna start.
Yes, which is going to be joining
after our handshake deal. Wait, do you want to do the handshake?
Let's do it right now. It's going to be joining Dragon Wagon Radio, which we're very happy about. But yeah, so you and Mark. And
Nick Mathis.
Okay, Nick Mathis, who's an incribly talented actor.
Who's an actor I adore, who I don't think he's acting anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, what a jerk.
I know. But at the time, I started writing a script. It was terrible, and I started shooting it before it was really done and regretted it every moment after that.
You were doing it entirely no budget on your own?
Pretty much. I actually just one day, out of the blue, I was like, because I had never raised money for a movie. One day I was like, well, I have access to a camera. I'm going to ask a friend of mine who had proposed investing in a film.
Oh.
Just randomly because they had received a life insurance settlement.
Oh, shit.
And so they had a lot of money and they believed in me for whatever reason. And said, if you need $5,000 for something.
Oh, that's
so I kind of.
It's a great way to. I mean, hell.
Kind of came out of nowhere, and at the time, I was like, well, that was like a start, but I knew 5,000's not.
No.
It was a ton of money to me at the time because, when you're working random jobs, broke out of your mind. It's like
Craigslist and Mandy.com.
That seems like an insane amount. So it started there. I asked some uncles of mine, and they all said no. Like if they'd add,
I love the ending of that story. I didn't think that was going to go that way.
They all said no. So I was like, all right, fuck it. I'm just going to go do it. And so I just went out and started shooting one thing at a time.
And it's not an unambitious project. It's VFX heavy.
Insane.
It's bizarre.
And I didn't know anything about anything when I was doing it. I thought, I've done like 20 shorts. I can do this. No problem.
Right. It's a whole different beast. Once you got to get to that 90-minute mark, it's a whole different beast.
The feature filmmaking is so different than short filmmaking. It's not even funny.
I mean, it's literally an investment in a minimum of a year of your time
and about 20 years of your life.
Yeah, seriously.
Like off the end of it.
Yeah, off the end.
Just because it's such a strain, and we shot 90% of the movie over the course of 2.5, 3 weeks.
Right.
Something like
that.
So
it was a pretty rushed shoot. Not rushed, but for a feature film, it's quick.
Actually, what am I saying? Like, I feel like it was like 2 or 3 2-week segments.
Gotja.
So they were, some of it was Palm Springs and some of it was elsewhere. Right. And then this was all started as a plan with Nick.
Who's co-stars in the movie.
He was going to write a film as well. And we were going to go to Colorado and shoot it there.
Gotcha.
So we were going to save some money, go move in with my dad, who's got a big place and he's never there. So we were going to move there and make his movie. And hopefully I've shot all of Apocalypse before we got there. That
happens, right.
I shot 90%. We went to Colorado and I started editing and Nick started writing more, but it never really his never really came together.
Gotcha.
And I got 80% of the way into editing. I was like, this has some problems.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no,
not making sense, or it's just not working for you.
It was just there's some just bad things in there.
Just decisions,
stuff that I didn't even edit some scenes because I knew when we were shooting it, I was like, this is terrible.
And I mean, for those listening, I mean, they can see the trailer for Apocalypse California online. It's when we tell you it's a bizarre movie. I mean, there are giant women. There are bodies switching. It's bizarre.
Sex-inducing drugs.
That's right.
As Teague would say on his podcast down in front, they would say the magic bean.
Right.
Too many magic beans.
Too many magic beans.
There can only be one magic bean in a movie.
Yes.
And there was like 15.
You had a jar of jelly beans that you were making people guess how many were in the jar. But with that said, I still enjoy the final product. I enjoy the movie very much.
The one thing, to jump ahead.
No, go for
one
it.
thing I always appreciated about, I mean, even though I hate the movie, in my deep soul, I hate the movie.
Really, do you?
I also love it.
Right.
But at the same time, the best comment I always hear was that it's not boring.
No, it's not boring. It is engaging as shit. I mean, I remember being enthralled with the movie the first time that I watched it. I really was. I'm not just saying that. Like, I was, because here's the thing is, this is also one of those things where I feel like something that you might think is your weakness that you might watch, and it's something that I learned with my film Pinch too, is I've had people who have seen it say something that I dismiss altogether that they thought was a huge strength. And for you, like, when I watch a movie like that, what I think is I could never write something like this. Like, I don't have the mind to conceive. I don't know if it's because I didn't do any drugs when I was supposed to be doing drugs. I don't know what it was, but I can't conceive something that is this high concept and still concise and interesting. I feel like I'm the type of person
You felt like it was concise?
I know that you might not think that, but what I meant when I say concise, I mean like there's a thread and it has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end, and it's not,
I feel confident in saying, like, the one thing I was proudest of, if anything, was that I felt like it's all in there.
Yeah.
Everything about that you need to know about everything. It's not Mulholland Drive where you're going to follow a through line and not be able to figure it out if you rewatch it a bunch of times.
Right.
This actually has everything in the movie, but you don't get it on the first viewing usually.
And here's the other thing that I was talking about, that when I watched it, I thought, like, shit, it is insanely unique.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it is insanely unique. And so you might watch it and be like, oh, this is fucking terrible for the reason. But like, I look at it and I go like, shit, I don't know that I have something this unique in me. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that I think that I'm bad at what I'm doing, but I'm just doing something different. And so like, I've had people approach me about, Pinch and say something about the writing or say something about, I would have never thought about these moments, or like this sort of thing is sort of very, I've had a lot of people tell me it's very throwback. They're like, I've had multiple people tell me they don't make movies like this anymore. And I've been like, well, you know what? Maybe that's my strength. Maybe that my strength is that I'm not this ultra modern. You know what I mean?
I think it's a major strength,
and
especially now.
And I would generally dismiss like that as not a strength of mine, but maybe it is. And so I'm telling you this to tell you, like, I think looking back at Apocalypse California, you can find a lot of strengths.
And I think that's also what I kind of dislike about the movie, is that I feel like it's a little too self-aware of how strange it is.
Okay.
And I felt that just because I know that's how I was feeling when I was writing it.
Right.
I was like, I wanted to write something that was unexpected, and it started to kind of snowball. And a lot of the things that are the weakest parts of that movie were things that I felt like I was taping together because the script was bad to begin with.
Right. Well, didn't you say that you did a lot of editing rewrites?
I mean, we shot 90% of the movie. I threw out literally 40% of that.
Oh shit!
I threw out a whole plot line. I added the Molly Mole character didn't exist in the original.
Interesting.
Which is funny because she's such a major.
She's the primary thread. She's like
and a lot
she's
of that,
the goal. She's
a lot of that had to do with the fact that the original script was John and Jacqueline, which were the
body
ones who
swap.
Switch. They were, if there was a romantic connection, it was them.
Oh,
but the actors, for whatever reason,
didn't have that.
That chemistry didn't exist at all. And it was an interesting
Also, I like it way better that they're not romantically linked because it makes the swapping way more
and I
interesting.
think that has everything to do with just how, because Erin was a friend of mine. She was in another short
Right.
film I had done before that. And so I hadn't worked with her on anything major.
Right.
And that was the first thing. And when you're doing the feature, you start to learn like how different characters play out.
Sure.
And
that's another thing too. You talk about just working with your friends. That's something that I've learned being somebody who's exclusively worked with his friends. There's only a very handful of roles I've ever had to cast. And I feel like when you take the strengths of somebody that you are aware of and then apply them to something greater, you learn a lot. Sometimes people surprise the shit out of you and you go like, wow, I didn't know that this was going to be this way. And sometimes you go like, the last one that was it. The short was where it was and now it's gone.
Yeah.
But,
and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus at any point in time because, I think we were all, I'm proud that we were all learning.
Dude,
on that movie.
Again,
and it was, I think about, we had 63 total shooting days in the end. That's insane.
I want to say that I don't want to say pinch. We had 40, 42 or 46.
That's awesome that you were able to get that many because it's hard to get that.
And that's the thing too, is obviously ours was way more simple than yours was. It's a dramedy. It's mostly people sitting in their apartments talking in homes and shit like that. But the hardest stuff for us was the baseball scenes, being out on the field with all the people. But even that, the trick for us was I couldn't rely on anybody as far as crew wise. Because there were some times where I would just have to, hey, this is going to be a 2-hour day and that's just going to be the way it is.
How many people did you ultimately?
0. That was the crew. It was me and whoever was able to show up. Matt was kind enough to show up and shoot a couple days randomly. Paul shot a couple. The majority of the movie is, I'm credited as the director of photography for the movie. The majority of the movie is me. If I'm not in the shot, I'm shooting it. And if I'm in the shot, I'm setting it up and then handing the camera operation off to people who generally don't know camera operation.
And the movie wouldn't exist if you hadn't done that.
And ultimately, that's what it's about. It's like you might not look back at, when I say look back at it fondly, I mean the product,
right?
But you made it. No one else was gonna make it.
Took 5 years, but
5 years. God,
how long did yours take from
400 and change days
from the day you started shooting?
No. Well, it took us 424 days from first day of shooting to last day of shooting, just because of scheduling.
Right.
So we shot it over the course of a year and change.
Yeah.
And then I think from that point on, it took me an additional maybe 4 months or 5 months to finish it. But here's the thing: is when you're shooting for that long, the movie's edited as it's, you know what I mean? Like the last day of shooting, I just had to plug in.
You already know exactly what you need.
Also, I had to plug in literally those 2 shots and the movie was done because it was already edited. Other than those 3 shots, that kind of shit. So it was a different beast. But
that's pretty much. I mean, because we shot 90% throughout, 40% of that, totally rewrote, went back, shot again like a year later.
Yeah. And that is such a hard thing to do, man.
At that point, I changed a lot of stuff around. My friend Eric Bronco came out and helped light a little bit on top of that. So I kind of had a bit more of a crew.
Right.
I don't think Matt ever helped. I don't know that Matt was out here yet. But I had to start learning about visual effects and getting stuff set up. I started talking to Brian Weber about doing some of the giant
helicopters and giant
Teague
giant
did like
McDaniels.
the nukes and stuff like that, but man, that the whole thing. And by the time I ended up going back down to see my uncles, and at that point, once I had started making the movie, they were like, "Oh, well, okay, if you do need money, I can help." So once they saw,
they needed to see that you were planting some seeds,
And so my uncle did end up putting some money in,
which is something that I found too. And I haven't done any sort of fundraising. Like Pinch has been entirely funded by myself. I have had a couple people help with very, very, very small amounts, just so that they can, get a credit for something and from being transparent and that sort of thing. For the most part, it's entirely my own. But I do feel like nobody's going to give me money for any project just because I have a piece of paper.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That I have a group of papers.
Yeah,
Whereas if I have a finished product or something that's mostly done, they're much more inclined because they're like, oh, okay, I can see where it, I can see what it needs.
It's such a, man, I think a lot of the reason why I hate Apocalypse in the end is because by the time I was done shooting it and editing it and everything, there was no money to do anything with it. And that's when you need money the most, really, to get it out there.
And I'm in that boat now where I literally have a project and I own it and it's great and it's done and I'm winning awards at film festivals and I'm excited. But I don't have a sales, I don't have a distribution, I don't have a representative, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have any money to help with any of that stuff.
Are you looking for it or are you considering?
I am, but it's one of those things, where we talked earlier about having the mental capacity to understand.
Well, we should talk because
we will talk.
I am a firm believer in because Apocalypse had an international sales agent signed onto it. Didn't do a damn thing with the movie.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
Didn't see a dime of that. They made a poster for it, which was kind of cool.
Great. Awesome. Thanks.
And they complained a lot. But ultimately, I shouldn't have signed that contract.
Right.
Because I signed the foreign rights away for 5 years. I kept the domestic rights, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to release it myself.
Sure.
So I had to pay $1,000 to a company called Bitmax, and they submitted it to iTunes and it went up on iTunes. And it didn't make a ton.
No.
It didn't make the budget back, that's for sure. But it made enough to make me go, okay, if this had been done differently, if the trailer had not come out
right
and been found by io9.com, I think.
Oh, really?
They found it on their own.
Interesting.
And they posted it.
That's incredible.
And I was not ready for it.
Oh, that's not incredible.
So it got all this publicity, and I was like, well, fuck, the movie's like,
not done
it's
yet,
like 9 months away from finishing.
Oh,
and
that sucks.
so all the publicity from that was gone.
Right.
And so the interest,
momentum was just sucked out.
And that was my number one. I was like, okay, never release a trailer for a movie this small unless the movie's ready to come out. Like the movie should be done.
I waited until that was something I was smart about, is I waited until I was completely done with it before I put a trailer together it. And the only reason for that was because I had no idea how to cut a trailer, and I was putting it off for as long as physically possible.
Trailers are hard, man.
Oh my God. Especially when your movie is non-formulaic in the sense where it's like, my movie doesn't fit into most categories. So when I was looking at how to cut a trailer for comedy, well, my movie's not funny enough to be a comedy. How to cut a trailer for dramas. My movie's not dramatic enough to be just a drama. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
It was so
you
hard.
Cut it so many different ways.
Also, like I was looking at sports movies, but I was like, you know what? My quote baseball movie isn't really a sports movie in the sense that it's not about, a team coming. It's not about an underdog team. It's not. There's not enough baseball. And if I were to use baseball in the trailer, it wouldn't be about the two main characters. So it was like it was so hard for me to cut that
I think
thing.
there's probably a whole audience
to this day,
out
I've
there
had
for your movie.
Potentially.
I think if you were to, if you're not looking for somebody to basically take your money and run,
right,
which is what movies, unfortunately, of our budget scale, they just get screwed. Like I've had another friend of mine, he convinced himself after I told him, no, don't do it. There's so many companies out there that are like, we'll take your movie, your money, and we'll put it up on all these iTunes, everything else. You can do that yourself.
Right.
You don't need a company to take $8,000 and
ultimately
put it up.
And ultimately they're using your product as a bargaining chip against other products that they are trying to make more money off of.
And the more
in a bulk,
the more films that they have access to, that gives them, you can't be an aggregate for iTunes unless you have 20 films in your catalog.
Exactly.
So they are getting their catalog from all these filmmakers, these poor bastards who are
just handing
blood,
over
sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
Here's $8,000. Here's $2,000. I got screwed for basically $2,500 by a guy who got me signed onto the international sales agent.
Right.
He's like, for $2,500.
Didn't do anything with it.
And then I looked the guy up a bit more, and I was like, well, he's done this for 14 other films with the same company.
Right.
He already had that connection set up. He knew he was going to do that.
Sure.
I get, if you want to admit to being an in-between, pay me this, I'll go straight to this one company.
Right.
Don't blow smoke up my ass.
Sure.
And that's what's
it's a fucking shady business, but not to make this fucking interesting. See, this is the problem when two fucking filmmakers get together. We just start
complaining.
We start bitching about how our movies are not making any money. In any case, we have been chatting for well over an episode and a half worth of material.
Oh, geez.
And I feel like we barely cracked the surface.
Yeah.
With the man with three first names.
We could always continue another time.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna have to continue this. Because I also want to hear about how the hell you ended up working on Mindhunter, and
We haven't even gotten to that.
I mean, like you're one of those guys who I feel like in LA is like, oh yeah, that's my friend, the indie filmmaker who knows how the industry works because he's also working in it, which is a rare thing.
Because I was sleeping in my car and I needed to get money after making Apocalypse, so I was like,
well, regardless of how it happened,
we can get into how it happened.
Because honestly, I feel like it's a rare thing out here. I feel like I have so many friends who are these indie, lifestyle guys who also simultaneously have no grasp on industry.
Right.
And I feel like you do, and I feel like that's
I have
valuable.
a better picture now than
Right.
I did. I still am learning day to day.
Right. I also want to talk about your road trip movie, which I'm so
Yeah.
angry about because it's just a thing that I've wanted to do for so long, and you went and did it.
I assume you're talking about the Australian one.
Yeah,
'cause I did one for Colorado as well.
Oh, really?
But that was a short film.
I meant Australia, where you essentially shot a
Yeah.
feature film, majorly improvised, if I'm not mistaken.
It was so basically I had done the Colorado short film,
Right.
which was one day I woke up and I was like, you know what?
Who wants to take a drive?
I wanted to do some like improvised, no script
Right.
road trip movie.
I had some shit to do that day when you posted something on Facebook.
That's right.
I was so angry
right.
because I was like, I want to be there right now for
And
this.
you could have been there.
Ugh.
But I ended up making something just basically the actor showed up. We talked about like, well, what do you want today? Like,
Right.
what do you want out of this? And
Right.
so we kind of figured it out as we went. And so I learned a lot of like what works, what doesn't work. What
Right.
doesn't work is scenes with more than one person. Because then unless you can't just tell two actors unless they're highly trained.
Extremely talented.
This is what you're talking about, and go with it.
right.
And so that was kind of a mess.
Yeah, you definitely need roadmaps for that sort of
Plus,
stuff, and
It
I'm
wasn't
actually
cast.
I'm actually working on that now because the next project. Well, one of the next projects I'm hoping
Mhm.
to get done is something that I also want to be sort of loosely scripted, and figuring out like how do I make a roadmap where these actors can get to the points they need to get to
Mhm.
while still simultaneously being as organic as possible and letting them just create. Like, how do you give people a roadmap and then tell them create? It's very difficult.
It's hard.
Very
It
difficult.
is. You need some solid actors, and that's
Yeah,
what I found in
right.
an Australian film. I had a friend of mine here in town. His name's Tommy. Still pretty young. I think he's 24, 25. And he was willing to go out
It's great.
to Australia with me. And so we flew down to Melbourne. And with my job, I was able to afford a red camera, which was
Wow.
a nice little expense.
Fantastic.
So I've been able to shoot on that when I can.
Yeah, that's great.
And so we started in Melbourne, and I had cast with a general idea of where we'd end up. So I cast some people in Adelaide and Melbourne and Perth
Gotcha.
because I knew we'd be driving from Melbourne
Right.
across the Nullarbor to.
You had your route planned.
It was insane. And along the way, we just kind of made it up. And I knew we would start the movie in LA. First scene is the guy proposing to his girlfriend on the way to the airport.
Okay.
She says no. And in his days, he still goes.
Gotcha.
And that's basically him
Right.
basically
So it's
getting there and going, oh, fuck, what have I done?
Right.
I booked all these places. So we went there. We shot in a lot of
like historical sort of like, like the places that you would, not historical, but touristy rather.
I just
like,
don't want to say the name of the company, but we
fair.
rented in air quotes
Fair.
places along the way, and we shot
Fair.
and just kind of bounced around.
That's
and,
great.
Somehow made it. We did have scenes where they did have to improvise because we were running out of daylight. and
Right.
We were like, okay, you guys, this is what it's got to be. But
Right.
they were so on board at that point, and they were both so
I feel like a lot of that comes
solid.
from rehearsing in character as much as possible
Yeah.
and just becoming as much of it as you can. But
but I was writing script
Right.
I was writing the script at night. I would stay up after a day of shooting and
gotcha.
I'd write like 3 or 4 pages of dialogue for the next day or what we were gonna do. So
Right.
it was more like I'm writing the script over the course of 15 days.
It wasn't
and
with-
we're filming it.
And it
over the
wasn't
course of 15
without
days.
direction though. It was sort of organic, but not
Yeah.
necessarily improvised.
It was tough because it was less of a crew than I had on Apocalypse.
I'm sure
it
it was.
was only me this
Gotcha.
time.
Yeah, I know all about that.
Yeah.
But
we can talk all
anyways,
about that
yeah,
in the future.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be like the Indie Filmmakers Bitch About Life podcast with Chad and Jake.
Yes.
How do people find you on the internet, and how do people find the work you've done on the internet, if any of it is indeed on the internet?
You can't really.
Oh,
and
great.
That's a bit of a problem. I don't know. I kind of went through a weird period where I was like, I'm going to take all my shit down because I'm not happy about a lot of it, And I have a feeling you've thought about that. Especially as I started to work in more professional circles, I was like, I don't really need people seeing sex, drugs, and Natalie Portman, so I'm going to take that off the internet.
I think I'm lucky in the sense that I started later, so I don't I wasn't making stuff when I was
were still like
20.
Losing your virginity.
Right. Also, I feel like the reason I can't do it for more recent stuff, when I say recent, I mean like 10 years ago, is like I just can't do that to the people that are involved in it. That's the problem.
Right.
When you have people that are kind of also, you know what I mean? Like that's
unfortunate.
Right. But that's kind of my mindset is I'm like,
that's something I would love to talk about on the next one because it is something that is bothersome. I have all kinds of stuff now that I'm so proud of. The thing I'm most proud of as a filmmaker, I can't release it online because I feel like now watching it, it's like basically documentary style filmmaking of just growing up over the course of a few years. And like Teague's in a lot of it and other friends of ours. And now that we're kind of in different places and, there's people that were maybe in a relationship in the film that are no longer in a relationship. They're in other relationships and I don't need,
Yeah, no, of course.
That's a whole
thing. I mean, ultimately, I think the question is it art?
Yes.
Well, then, right? I mean, like, that's kind of it.
Yeah. Except when YouTube takes it down for copyright infringement for all the music you've got in it.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's it.
That's why we have Vimeo. In any case, how do people find, if they can't find your work, how do they find you?
On Vimeo, there is. I think vimeo.com/ChadPeter. I've got Apocalypse is up there.
In its entirety?
In its entirety. I think
fantastic.
It's like 99 cents or whatever.
Well,
and also a fashion film I did starring Lucy Hale from last year called Waiting on Roxy.
Nice.
And Colorado, the road trip movie.
Oh, and the road trip movie. Yeah. And you are on social medias?
I am. Facebook's a little harder to find, but I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and just starting that. I've been doing that podcast with Mark since December. And,
that's called The Hell With This.
The Hell With This.
I really look forward to you officially joining Dragon Wagon Radio. We're going to do a lot of really fun things. You're going to start hearing
get so sick.
All sorts of commercials and all sorts of fun stuff happening. And I'm going to definitely irritate you to be on that show as much as physically possible.
Yes.
I friggin' love it. It's quite fun. Quite fun. As always, find me on Twitter @LiquidJake and follow Elaborate Pod for all things related to the show on all social media. Hey, this is a really great thing you could do is you can help us out. You can leave reviews. We are on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. We are on Google Play. We are on Castbox. We are on things that podcasts are on. And on all of those things, you can rate and review shows. That is incredibly helpful to us. It helps us rank. It helps people find the show organically. Aside from organically, another really great way for people to find the show is for you to share it. If you enjoy the show, whether this or any previous episodes or just the show in general, if you hear me bitching, if you enjoy my daddy issues and all of my sad sacking, then share it with somebody. Be like, hey, look at this sad sack. He's fucking sad sacking all over the internet, and you should listen to it too. That would be great. And lastly, as always, follow It's Dragon Wagon for all things Dragon Wagon Radio. Thank you guys so much for listening. Be good to each other. Don't be shits. And make art and be awesome. Chad, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Love you, brother.
I love you.
Hey guys, I am sitting here with Cheryl Jones. How's it going, Cheryl?
Fine. How are you?
I'm great. You have a podcast.
I do have a podcast. It's called Movies Made Me.
And when you say movies that made you mean your favorite movies, right?
Well, maybe, but maybe not. It could be a movie you hate, but if it influenced you in some way to be who you are, that's what we're talking about.
Fantastic. So every episode you have a different person on.
Yes.
Who tells you their top 5 most influential movies. How do people find it?
They can find it at mmmpodcast.com, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Google Play Music.
It's Dragon Wagon.